So welcome to the CSC Development in Action webinar. Today we will be delivering a webinar on the role of social enterprises in aiding developing nations in attaining the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the speaker is going to highlight the Jamaican context in regards to the webinar topic. Introducing the webinar speaker, today we have with us, bear with me, please. Sorry. Today we have with us Edward Dixon. Edward is a 2015 Commonwealth Scholar from Antigua and Barbuda, and he completed his PhD in Creative and Cultural Entrepreneurship at Goldsmiths University of London. A bit more introduction about Edward. Edward is a lecturer in entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship at the University of West Indies, which is the Five Island campus. He's also the director of the Center for Entrepreneurship Thinking and Practice at UWI at the Mona campus. And part of his responsibility includes strategic direction, operations, and research. And in his webinar today, he will talk all about his work and especially discuss the Jamaican context. So over to you, Edward. Please do share the overview of the webinar, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Eva. Good morning, afternoon, evening, good night to all the participants as well. Just a quick clarification. So I'm a Jamaican citizen. I actually work in Antigua now, so I'm Jamaican for all my colleagues who might think that I'm disowning them. All right, so for our webinar today, I'll be discussing, briefly making a distinction between social entrepreneurship and social enterprises, and also kind of a distinction between social enterprises and MSMEs. There's often, persons who use the terms interchangeably or consider SEs to be MSMEs. I will also provide some historical context and facts, as well as some context about social enterprise and their development in Jamaica, and then make that connection between social enterprises and Vision 2030, which is our national development plan in Jamaica, and then by extension, the Sustainable Development Goals. And then I'll end by providing some recent developments in the sector in the Jamaican context, as Eva would have made mention of. So we'll start off with a poll question to the persons on the call. So, the poll question, social entrepreneurship is primarily about making a profit for shareholders.
I hope you all can see the poll question on your screen. Please do select your options. We will end it in a few seconds. Edward, I'm sure you can see the responses coming through.
Yes, I'm seeing them coming through.
Perfect. All right, I think we are ready to share the results.
All right, so we're seeing that about a quarter of the persons say that yes, social entrepreneurship is primarily about making a profit for shareholders, while majority, say 77%, are saying no. So we'll get to that in a little bit. So social entrepreneurship, what is it? Really, it is a field of study, or a philosophy, as I would like to call it, that really blossomed over the last 30 years or so, give or take. It is still a fledgling field in my estimation, with a lot of contestations. It's a really contested field. with one of the main issues being the centrality of business or economics to the achievement of what we consider to be the social mission. I'll touch on that a little bit more later. So this philosophy about the achievement of what we call social, environmental, and cultural value, or the triple or quadruple bottom line, is central to social entrepreneurship as a field. And so the main aim really of social entrepreneurship is to advance social, environmental, and cultural objectives through an economic vehicle, right? So the idea here is that the economic component within social entrepreneurship is really a vehicle or a conduit through, or an approach through which these social, environmental, and cultural objectives would be met. So the profit for the shareholder is not the main objective, but really it is to advance the benefit of what we call stakeholders. And by stakeholders here, we mean beneficiaries of different programs or project activities, volunteers, staff members, and government. Government, I use government here to be both indirect and direct beneficiaries of the service that are provided by social enterprises within the broad area of social entrepreneurship. So as a field, it really, from my perspective, developed in a context of government and market failure on the one hand. And by that, we mean that government and market, well, businesses and enterprises, traditional enterprises as we know them, failure to deliver certain goods and services to the entire population. And so on the one hand, we have government or market failure. From the market side of things, they are either unwilling or unable to provide some of these, services to the population. And on the other, social entrepreneurship emerged within a broader context of sustainability within the third sector. And by third sector here, we mean, civil society, NGOs, which is non-governmental organizations, and really most of the spaces that are not covered by government, public sector services, or the private sector. So all that area in between is considered to be a part of the third sector. And so the social enterprises, was the next question asked here, do social enterprises do not reinvest any of their profits or surplus into the achievement of their social mission? Eva?
Yes, getting it through.
Okay.
You should now be able to see the whole question.
Yes, we're seeing it. So social enterprises do not reinvest any of their profits or surplus into the achievement of their social mission.
Give it some more time for everyone to respond to the question. Okay.
Thanks, Eva. So we're seeing here that 15% of persons say yes, and 85% say no to the question of whether or not social enterprises do not reinvest any of their profits or surplus into the achievement of their social mission. All right, so what are social enterprises? We'll try to get to that answer, in our understanding of what social enterprises are. And so social enterprises are really the vehicles or the business models, because we recognize that there are some persons who use the approach, but they're not formally registered to do so either by choice or by the lack of the relevant legislation to support it. So these are vehicles. So either for social enterprise, it can be a collective, so an organization, or as many of us will know, it's social entrepreneurs, which are individuals who seek to address some social issue or problem within their communities. Here, popular example that is always used is of Muhammad Yunus from trying to remember the name of his group. He had done some work in Bangladesh, the Grameen Bank, as an example of someone who is considered to be a social entrepreneur, so an individual who would have taken up a challenge, seeing women within the society not having access to certain resources, financial, capital to finance their businesses. And it would have changed the model in terms of the financing model that is used to help women in the Bangladeshi society access certain financial resources. And so the strategy that is used as an individual to solve that problem is, what would have given him the moniker of social entrepreneur. So social entrepreneur, the individual, social enterprise is the organization or the collective. And the aim of that grouping is to achieve some sort of social mission through a commercial activity. So the business aspect or the economic aspect is the way in which you gain financial viability or sustainability to continue that work. Maybe to help with poverty reduction, help with youth crime, issues at the local level. As it relates to the surplus, I call it surplus. I use profits in the poll question, and there's debates about whether or not we should call it profits, as profits are normally associated with traditional enterprises. But the idea of a surplus here is that for social enterprises, there is usually a reinvestment of these surpluses into the achievement of the social mission. And that is kind of one of the stark difference between traditional businesses and social enterprises, where for traditional businesses, the aim is a profit maximization motive for the business and for its shareholders, as opposed to social enterprises, where the idea is to the achievement of the social mission is central, and the surplus that the business creates should ideally be reinvested in the achievement of these social mission or social objectives. And oftentimes, these social mission have to be explicitly stated in your articles of association or your registration documents. So it's not something that you do in an informal way, but it's something that has to be formally documented, that this is the way that you are going to operate as an organization or as an individual, as the case may be. So in many cases, and the literature on the reinvestment strategy of social enterprises is usually, again, there are differences of opinion on the percentage. So in many cases, it's like to be between 51% to 100% of those surpluses that are reinvested. So depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, the country, you're likely to have differences in terms of how much social enterprises are required to reinvest into the social mission or the social objectives of the organization. And this is often, when we talk about surpluses, we're talking about, that which is left after the social enterprises have covered their operational expenses, which includes paying staff and other day-to-day activity. So the idea here is that majority of that surplus should go back to the social enterprise activity. 'Cause, 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 'cause And then the last point on this slide as well, speak to something that is, really recent, but very important in, for me, it wouldn't be something that we use to classify social enterprises, but it's an important part of what they do. So due to, their nature, they have attributes of both traditional enterprises and third sector charity type organizations. They have had to come up with ways of communicating the impact that they're advancing through their work. And so, measuring social impact, both for their own benefit to see exactly, what they've been doing and how they've been doing it as a monitoring and evaluation approach, but also as a means of communicating to their various stakeholders is important. So this idea of measuring social impact has its strategic importance for social enterprises as well. But as I said, I wouldn't consider it to be a tenet, but a very important part of how they communicate what they do. And this graph simply, gives you a graphical representation of the organizational spectrum. And as you can see on your left, you see where traditional nonprofits are, where, these are organizations that are strictly about their mission. So, we will have a organization that is geared towards environmental protection. So they have as their mission, that, protection of the beaches, clean up the beaches, having, public education sessions and so on. And they'll spend a lot of time on doing that. And they'll probably fundraise or get grants and other donations to support their mission. Right. On the other end of the spectrum are traditional for-profit organizations. This is where we have, the idea of the profit maximization element, and there is the primacy of the shareholder. And so this is the example, just of the spectrum, and you can see where the social enterprises fit within this spectrum. You can see that they're closer to the traditional nonprofits, but they have elements of the traditional for-profits where there is an income generating activity or some economic activity that is happening as well. And then from a sustainability perspective, we look at the issue of the social objective. So the social value creation is central to what they do. And for this, an example could be of a social enterprise or a social entrepreneur who is keen on reducing knife crimes among young people in North London, or say giving young girls an opportunity to explore careers in ICT. And I recall that last week we celebrated Girls in ICT Day across the world. And so these are examples of areas of where the social value is what is considered to be important. And on the other end of the spectrum, the economic value for traditional enterprises. And just another quick example of that. For the traditional enterprises, though, the idea here is on creating value for the company and the investors. So here they're really interested or invested in, say the companies. If you as an individual invest in a company on the stock exchange, you normally buy into the customer based on the ability to provide you with a dividend or some, increase in stock prices. And so at least once a year, the company has to, do an AGM, an annual general meeting, where they would, say to you, whether or not they have achieved the intended objectives, and to give you a lot of an idea in terms of how they've been gone about doing that. And so it's a bit of a simplistic example, but it gives you the idea that the growth of the business and making sure that the shareholders' benefit is central to what they do. And then our third and last poll question asks whether social enterprise as a practice is relatively new in Jamaica.
We'll give it a few more seconds for all the responses to come in. Hey, anyone? Should we end the poll, Edward?
Yes, you can. You can. You can. I think we have 30 out of 30. We have all, well, there are some others, but
Yes.
yeah, you can. You can. You can. I think
Yeah.
it's not a fair.
I've shared the response.
Yes. All right. So I'm seeing that 27% of persons said yes, and 73% of persons said no. Thanks for your participation in our polls. So the idea of social entrepreneurship, social enterprises, the concept is relatively new. So in the last, say, 15 to 20 years, the concept has kind of blossomed in the Jamaican context. But in terms of established practice, so the essence of that question was in the area of practice, and so we have had a lot in terms of practice in the Jamaican context, way before our independence period in 1962. And so what we would have seen is that there are, examples even, back to our emancipation period, where, well, the post-emancipation period, through the development of things such as the free villages in Jamaica, where the recently freed enslaved persons were able to, pool together, get resources to purchase land and to set up, their own independent villages. So these practices in and of themselves have been around for a long time. And it's also shown in other areas, such as the establishment of cooperatives, mutuals, and benevolent societies. Also, other practices such as burial schemes are examples of social enterprise type models and practices that have been in the Jamaican context over a long time. Other practices such as susu partners, so different ways of generating resources as well, as a means of what we call the social and solidarity economy. So areas where persons come together, pool their resources, have been practices that have been around for a very long time. The concept, though, as I said earlier, is relatively new in terms of the words that are used. One of my colleagues, Dr. Knife, would say that it's the new wine in old bottles. So it's something that has been around in practice for a long time, but it has just not been called what it is being called currently. As it relates to, so some work has been done on social and mapping the sector. And we have found that, well, the work done by the Center for Entrepreneurship Thinking and Practice at the UMONA would have done some work to look at what is the current state of practice some time ago. And, we found that, many of these social enterprises have taken, they have been in different areas, such as the creative and cultural industry, the agricultural sector, hospitality, education, employment. And so one such that comes readily to mind for me is the Forward Step Foundation that uses the creative and cultural industry through music, arts and craft, and other artistic expression to address issues such as crime, teenage pregnancy, and so on within the Gregory Park community in St. Catherine, and also has expanded across the island to do other initiatives geared towards different youth and community development initiatives as well. We also have areas, agricultural cooperatives such as the Hanover and the St. Thomas Beekeepers Association, with their aim of both fostering the livelihood, the economic livelihoods of farmers in parishes, but by extension, bringing well-needed public education about the importance of bees to our ecosystem, or agricultural ecosystem as well. So they've been doing a lot of work more on the social side, but in recent times, we've been showing them the importance of their economic viability. So the mapping exercise also showed that there are, these social enterprises are dealing with a diverse set of beneficiaries. So, we have our at-risk youths, elderly, and so on, so persons with disabilities as well. They're dealing with a lot of different types of beneficiaries, and they provide service to, in many cases, a wide cross-section. So they're not able to specialize oftentimes within these community contexts. They're usually the closest to these persons who are vulnerable. And so oftentimes they usually, they're usually stretched thin in terms of trying to address multiple, challenges that are faced within their communities. So they tend to focus on, diverse beneficiaries as well. And they come in different forms in terms of, many of them, as we said before, many of them are practicing, and so they use whatever form they have at their disposal in the absence of, legislation surrounding their legal status. And so we've found that many of them are registered as NGOs, which are non-governmental organizations. Some of them are community-based organizations. Others are community development committees. Some have registered as limited liability companies. Others are youth-serving organizations. So you can see just the range of, in terms of types of organizations. Some also register in a different types. So we have under our Companies Office of Jamaica, you either be able to limit it by guarantee or a company that is limited by shares and so on. So we have different types of registration status and forms that these social enterprises normally use in the absence of legislations. We've also found that they have an annual turnover of just under $5,000. Right, so they're also generating some economic activity as well. So in addition to the work that they're doing with these vulnerable groups, they're also, earning they're also doing some stuff on the economic side of things as well. And many of them, as we said before, the social mission, their idea is to empower, their various beneficiaries. There has also been some work looking at enhancing and developing the social enterprises through the Jamaica Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises and Entrepreneurship Policy. So both iterations of the policy now address in a very direct way the importance of social enterprises to the micro, small, and medium enterprises sector in Jamaica. So the idea here is that they face many of the similar challenges in terms of informality, lack of access to resources, capacity issues, especially around leadership and operational related issues. And they also have, weak structures as a problem as well. And so the policy spoke specifically to ensuring that there are either macro or micro ways of evidencing the impact that they're having. So this idea of social value creation is an important part of the work, bearing in mind that, social enterprises have always had to try to legitimize their existence because of this. For me, there is a kind of a black and white perspective on the economy. So either you're in the traditional economy or you're in the charity sector. So the fact that social enterprises are essentially hybrid organizations that have, components of both types of, entities, they are usually placed under, increased scrutiny and, which can oftentimes be very punitive to them as well. Here, I'm looking at a case of the Defcan Coffee, which is, Defcan is a social enterprise and what I would call a work integration social enterprise. And the main aim is to assist their, main beneficiaries who are, deaf students, to integrate them into the labor market. As we often know, persons with disabilities are normally have various challenges in being incorporated into the labor market and so on. And so, the DEFCAN started out as an NGO that was catering to the deaf community, but has since evolved into a social enterprise through, they're working through the Caribbean Christian Community for the Deaf. You can check out a little bit more about them at www.defcancoffee.com. And really what they do is they provide end-to-end services related to coffee. So they have barista services, so they train the youngsters in, serving, brewing and serving coffee, but also from the agricultural perspective as well. So they've tried to use this social enterprise as a means of continuing their work, the education, the labor market preparation and development for persons with disabilities, persons who cannot hear. What I found, quite, well, not interesting, it's something that is a feature of many of the social enterprises, that many of them still hold on to that donative or fundraising element of their work. So whilst they're, doing the social enterprise, they still, because of their genesis, they still have that non-profit kind of philosophy. And so, part of the work is to, try and, help them to, evolve beyond this philosophy of, the donative function. So kind of, still accessing donations as one of their major funding sources. But as I said before, it's a part of the evolution, and, it's something that will take time. So that was DEFCAN Coffee. So social enterprises and Vision 2030. So the Vision 2030 is Jamaica's national development plan, which aims to get Jamaica to developed country status by 2030. So we're 5 years away from, Vision, the 2030, the year 2030. But important about the Vision 2030 is the focus on inclusive growth. So the Planning Institute of Jamaica, which is the government agency responsible for national development planning, focuses on a couple of focal areas, including equality and equity, health, social protection, safety and security, among others. So as you'll see from the slide that we'll go to next, it has 4 main goals in terms of the Vision 2030, and the idea here is that social enterprises address 3 of those goals, which I consider here to be the non-traditional economic activities. And the last one, which is goal 3, focuses on the economic. So the social enterprises essentially contribute to achieving all 4 of those goals. And I'll just skip to it quickly for you to see. Hopefully you're able to see the diagram quickly, but we have Jamaicans empowered to achieve their fullest potential, and you can see the corresponding national outcomes. Jamaican society that is secure, cohesive, and just. Jamaican economy is prosperous. That's the economic goal I spoke to earlier. And Jamaica has a healthy natural environment. So you can see that connection between the social mission that the social enterprises are geared towards achieving, and the connection with this national development plan. You can see the environment, you can see areas of health and other social related issues of safety and security and so on. And you can see also the economic contribution that the National Development Plan speaks to as well. So taking, just quickly before I move on, taking safety and security, pulling out safety and security from the national objectives as an example. We find in the Jamaican context that crime and violence is a major challenge, something that the government has been doing some work towards tackling, but we find that there's still a pervasive kind of issue throughout the island. And implicitly and explicitly, social enterprises have sought to include the reduction in crime and violence as part of what they do in terms of their social mission. So there might be a social enterprise that is focused on an education program, an after-school program, or a remedial education program, or a sporting program, or some other activity. But one of the objectives they always have is to contribute to the reduction of crime and criminal activity. And so, so all of, the social missions usually, make some reference to the achievement of, one or two of the national development goals or national outcomes in the Vision 2030. Of note, recently we had as it relates to social enterprise and the sustainable development goals, the UN General Assembly in 2002 recognized the social and solidarity economy, or the social economy. Again, similar phrases for the social enterprise and social entrepreneurship, as being an important part of achieving the sustainable development goals. And you can see, based on what they have spoken about here, so localizing the SDGs, so bringing these development goals, sustainable development goals, to the community level is an important part. And social enterprises work cohesively, both with them, with other social enterprises, other NGOs, and state and non-state actors as well, to bring these goals to the community level. So localizing the sustainable development goals is an important part of the work that is done by these social enterprises. Also, inclusive and sustainable growth. So the idea here is that, we've always heard this idea, we have countries where, they've had an economic boom, but their aspects of their population do not, benefit. So this idea of the trickle-down effect does not always, pan out. As we see, there are differences between, those who have the resources and those who don't. And so, we've even seen in recent times, efforts afoot to change how we view growth and economic growth in particular, and how we can get it to be a little bit more equitable. And so service provision to the vulnerable populations are also an important part of that process as well. So including youth, children, elderly, marginalized women, and other population, other minority groups is an important part of the work done by social enterprises. And, that's how they contribute towards the achievement of many of the goals. So normally we say, they directly affect probably the first 6 or 7 goals, and then contribute to others through their work as well. So in terms of recent developments in the social enterprise landscape in Jamaica, so we do have a Social Enterprise Legal Status Act, which really serves as an important step in creating an environment where legitimacy is going to be gained for social enterprises, and it will allow them to function more effectively. As I mentioned earlier, the fact that they're within, that they're not really traditional enterprises and they're not really charities, it leaves a lot of, areas for them to be treated differently or more harshly than others. And so with the Act, it will provide that space, that opportunity for them to register to be officially recognized, through either the Department of Cooperatives and Friendly Societies or by the Companies Office of Jamaica. And they're able to get, all the designations that would arise from them being able to register as social enterprises. Importantly as well, we recently, well, it's probably not as recent anymore, but we've established the social stock exchange in Jamaica as well, where these organizations will be able to enlist, it will aid in terms of their capacity development as well, because they do have to, satisfy certain requirements on the part of the social stock exchange through the Jamaica Stock Exchange to be listed on the social stock exchange. And this will provide certain access to funding, so they'll be able to tap into funding sources, but also be able to develop their own service provision as well. So a very important development, the first of its kind in the Caribbean, and it's not something that is widespread across the world either. I think a couple countries, Brazil, India, South Africa, has social stock exchanges. So it's a very important and inspired move. And I think it will really aid as a big part of the social enterprise ecosystem to build the sector out as well. There are also policy-related things. So we have the Social Enterprise Working Group, which is a multi-sectorial grouping. So we have persons from the public, private sector, academia, NGO sector that's a part of that working group that is really trying to guide the development of social enterprises, social enterprise policy and practice as well. The MSME policy, as was mentioned earlier, through the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, they've revised the policy twice in the last, decade. And that's important. It's showing that a lot of the work that is being done by the Center for Entrepreneurship Thinking and Practice through technical reports, social impact measurement tools, and indices. So we've found that the center has done a lot of work, research work, that has underpinned a lot of the developments that we have seen. So the policy, a lot of the work has informed the MSME and entrepreneurship policy, the social stock exchange, some of the work of the working group as well, and the social working group as well. We have also seen improvements in the social entrepreneurship education. More some of the informal, well, not formal, informal programs geared towards introducing social entrepreneurship within schools, primary schools, secondary schools. Work has also been done on developing the entrepreneurship at the CAPE level, Caribbean Advanced Proficiency level, which is pretty similar to the A levels and GCEs in the UK. Work has also been done from the perspective of foundations as well. Many different foundations, including the Digital Foundation, has done work to build the capacity of social enterprises through, providing support, capacity building support, and other funding sources to help them to continue to develop as organizations. As I said, I must really single out the work of the center. What we have found is that some of the alumni from the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission, Dr. Kadamawe Knife, Mr. Michael Marshall, who is completing his PhD as well. A lot of the work has been done to advance social entrepreneurship. within the region, and particularly development of the technical reports, social impact measurement tools, which we see as a very important part of ensuring that social enterprises are able to document the social value that they're creating, as well as to, kind of project that onto the macro level to kind of show the contributions of social enterprises to the GDP of the country as well. Is something that is ongoing, and is something that we have, seen the Planning Institute of Jamaica take on. So we're currently trying to develop matrices that are able to better capture the contribution of social enterprises to national economic development as well. So these works are continuing. Other universities I know are doing work around this area as well. So the University of Technology, the Northern Caribbean University as well, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, as was mentioned earlier, the Social Stock Exchange, the Social Working Group, the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, foundations, as was mentioned earlier, Digicel Foundation, Victoria Mutual Foundation, as well, doing work at the level of the primary schools, primary and secondary schools. The Social Investment Fund, there are a couple of actors in the ecosystem as well doing work on providing support of different types, financial and other support. So the Jamaican Social Investment Fund, through their different projects, including the READY Project, Development Bank of Jamaica, through their programs as well, the Social Development Commission through their Local Economic Development Initiative, the National Housing Trust through the Social Venture Challenge, are just a few examples of different actors in the social enterprise ecosystem that are doing work in this area. I think my time has expired, Eva. That's it from me. I think we have some time. Hopefully I've left enough time for some questions, Eva.
We do definitely. That was a brilliant presentation and so
Thank you.
much to learn about social enterprises in Jamaica. You've explained what are social enterprises, back to the basics. And of course, you've given, the historical background about social enterprises in Jamaica and how it contributes to the National Development Plan, which is Vision 2030. Shout out to your fellow Commonwealth alumni as well, who have contributed towards social enterprises in the region. So thank you so much for sharing this piece of work. And I would now like to open the room for Q&A session. We have received a few questions via the registration form. So thank you to all those who have submitted questions in advance. We will start the Q&A session by raising some of those questions, but of course, please do send in your questions in the chat box, and we will try our best to address these in the time that we have left. So, Edward, the first question is, what policy frameworks and government support mechanisms in Jamaica enable or hinder the effectiveness of social enterprises in contributing to the achievement of UN Sustainable Development Goals?
That's a good question. I think I'd kind of alluded to a couple of them. The absence of that legal framework to help in terms of clarifying the status of social enterprises. So as I said earlier, many of them have been practicing informally. Many of them have different, they've registered as different types of organizations. And so they're not able to fully, register as social enterprises to get whatever benefits would accrue to them. So the absence of that legal, and we are in the process, it hasn't been, the act hasn't been passed to recognize the legal status as yet. So that creates a challenge because as you can imagine, if you don't have that status, there are certain things that you're not able to access, right? You'll probably not be able to get a loan. A bank might ask you, what is a social enterprise? Why are, and there's also, as I mentioned earlier, the perception, so the traditional perception of organizations. So either you're a business and all of the things that come with being a business, or you're a charity and we have a Charities Act that support charity, other philanthropic kind of endeavors. And so if because of the hybrid nature of social enterprise, they fall within, if you have only those two kind of status to choose from, both of them would limit what you can and can't do. And so that's why having a status in and of itself will help, to, avoid some of those challenges that you'd face as an organization. So the absence of that act is something that we see. If we get that act passed, then it will kind of ease out some of those, challenges, the imposter syndrome that you probably have. You're not really a part of the third sector in and of itself, in terms of the traditional charity sector, but you're also not fully a traditional enterprise. So it will kind of, help to change, that thought process. And the thought process is important as well. The idea, that is black or white. So it's either you're a charity or an enterprise, and you're dealt with in that way by not only individuals, but by other organizations, other official organizations that sometimes don't recognize your status. So that is kind of a critical one for me in terms of the ecosystem.
That is quite interesting. And in terms of the entrepreneurs themselves and the role that they can play, how can entrepreneurs work collaboratively with the government in terms of, advancing this act or any policies around social enterprises?
So that's a good question. I think there's always been a collaborative approach taken by the third sector, but also by social enterprises in working with all stakeholders. So the nature of the Jamaican society is one in which we see collaboration as being a critical part of getting anywhere, successfully. So it's a tool in terms of being able to share their concerns and issues. I mentioned the issue of the social enterprise working group as an example. So this is a cross-sector collective of individuals who work together. And so you get the perspectives, the government and policy perspective, you get the small business, the private sector perspective, you get the NGO perspective, you get the academic perspective as well. And so that is kind of always been the approach to the development of the sector where everyone is involved. And so the working group, but also through their own advocacy, they provide important services, and what I consider to be very important services at the community and parish level. And so, it's automatic. In many cases, government see them as a partner. They really partner in many initiatives. Many of the international development partners do a lot of their work through NGOs and social enterprises as well. Especially when they don't want to have, governments being the ones, doing certain activities. They'll route some of these resources through social enterprises and NGOs. And so as I said, the partnerships are there, and, the working together in different fora helps, to improve their ability to advocate for, changes that they need to see and legislation that needs to happen as well.
Thank you so much for your response to those two questions. I'm going to combine two questions that have come in the chat box. So one of the attendees is a teacher who's passionate in education technology. And the question is about how can someone contribute to or establish a social enterprise that addresses digital learning gaps in rural schools with limited infrastructure? And just combining that with another question is, basically what skills are essential? What are the essential skills in establishing a social enterprise?
All right, so I'll take the first one first. The person interested in a teacher interested in ICTs in rural schools is what I got.
Yeah.
So the first issue is I'd have to know what is the current state. Does your country currently recognize social enterprises, which is the first kind of issue. Many countries still don't have a official legislation around social enterprise, and so many persons would normally do, either work within the parameters of what currently exists, so whether it be an NGO, another not-for-profit organization, or so on, or you'll do your social enterprise practices. So you'll essentially act as a social enterprise, although you might not have that official recognition as a social enterprise. So many persons normally start in that way. They normally start small, an individual or a group. So what I would probably suggest for you is I'm sure there are other like-minded persons or organizations within your country or your region who would like to align with something along this line. ICT in rural schools, that's a major issue. We found out in COVID-19 that the persons who are affected greatly by the COVID-19 pandemic were persons in rural areas that didn't have access to ICTs, whether it be internet connectivity or devices. So this is something that, I saw personally in the Jamaican context, and I saw persons who took up the initiative to try and bridge that gap. So whilst government might do some, in tandem with other persons who are, and we've always had that culture where we support, we are from those communities, and we might be persons in the diaspora. So another part of what I've seen work, and then through my own PhD research, is what I call community philanthropy, where we connect with persons who would have come from our communities and who are now in various parts of the world, who are interested in providing resources back to the communities from which they came. And so finding these persons and selling them the idea in terms of what you want to do, how you want to do it. And I'm sure there are persons who are willing to give back in terms of skills as well. So it might not always be financial resources and other physical resources, but through your voluntary, your time. I know a lot of times we have retired teachers, so persons within your local space who are interested in giving back. We have a very strong culture of paying it forward, as I would call it. So giving back to a society, a place, a school that would have provided much to you. So community philanthropy. I also see, what I call diaspora education philanthropy, which is where persons who are from, your alma mater, you give back to your alma mater as well. So if you're establishing a program within a school, you try to reach out to persons who attended that school as well. And they are oftentimes persons who are very nostalgic. They remember their teachers, they remembered some good experiences that they had at school, and they use this warm glow idea where they're able to give back because of that positive experience that they had before. And so these are, I think, examples, and we can probably talk offline with the person who mentioned that. We can talk about some of the other ways in which you can build on this idea, because a lot of times that is where it starts. It starts with an individual with an idea. They're seeing a social problem, and they sometimes feel as if they're the only one. But then there are other persons within your network who might have had the same idea, but they haven't made the step. So I would say, start to let people know what you're doing. Start to communicate with others. The church is always also a very important stakeholder who can provide access as well as resources as well. So I would say try to tap into those resources. You also have corporate foundations. You might want to see if there are corporate foundations who are doing similar work. So I would say if you're doing ICT, if there's a company that deals with selling electronics, a company that is doing internet service provision in your country. These are companies that would likely come on board to assist with the work that you're doing, right? So I'd love to speak with you off here to kind of explore some of the possibilities as well. In terms of the person who asked about essential skills,
Yeah, soft skills.
yeah, some of the
Soft
soft
skills.
skills.
Yeah.
So networking is important. Being able to communicate your ideas to different persons, so beneficiaries, governments, international development partners, community members. So communication is important. Being able to, when you've developed your social enterprise as well, you will need human resource management skills. So you'll have persons who are volunteers, you'll have staff members, you'll have other persons that you'd have to be able to, they'll have different needs, and so you'd have to be able to understand those needs and to it's cater to the needs of your different stakeholders, and as I said before, they can be volunteers, they can be staff members, and so on. So you'll have to have that ability to talk with persons from different backgrounds. The beneficiaries as well are persons you need to be able to talk to. You will probably have to have some background in terms of operating a business. We usually find that with many social enterprises, they have challenges with capacity, building their own capacity. So scaling an enterprise, understanding in what is required to continue to do your work is important. And also being able to manage growth. So a big issue we normally see with social enterprises is what we call mission drift. And this is where the social mission diminishes as the economic side of the social enterprise grows. So you begin to be pulled in different directions. So be able to keep focus on what we consider to be that social objective is another important soft skill that anyone wishing to start a social enterprise needs to have as a matter of course.
Perfect. Thank you so much for responding. Just conscious of time,
Yes.
and to let other attendees know as well, we are slightly overrunning the Q&A session just because we have quite a few interesting questions come through. So, Edward, if you are okay, can I take maybe one or two more questions? One more
Yes.
question,
Yes.
and then we move forward to
Yes.
the post-webinar networking session. Great. But all those of you who would like to leave the webinar, if you have other commitments, please feel free to do so. But thank you so much for attending this session. Edward, next question. You mentioned about DEFCAN and how that started as a traditional NGO and then developed into a social enterprise. So just curious about the life cycle of social enterprises. Do social enterprises ever transition or evolve into something else? And what is the longevity of social enterprises? Are they typically long lasting?
All right, so that's a very good question in terms of so social enterprises, and I'd probably love to distinguish between. So based on the jurisdiction you're in, you'll find that types of social enterprises differ. So social enterprises in the US, the United States, they usually have the moniker social entrepreneur. So it's usually an individual looking to solve a social problem of some sort through an economic activity. In other places, continental Europe, Italy, Spain, they're traditionally more geared towards social enterprises or an organization of some sort. I often use One of the big ones in Spain is Mondragon, which is a cooperative that came out of the Catholic Church, and it became so pervasive. It started to deal a lot of issues surrounding agriculture, food processing, and so on. So it really depends on where you are, how the evolution will happen. But in many cases, social enterprises are rooted in that social mission. So if, as I mentioned earlier, the issue of mission drift starts to happen. So if you start to favor the economic side more than the social mission, or the social mission becomes non-existent, that is when you're probably going to change. The laws within your country will dictate. So if it is that you're reporting on the activities of your organization, and it's no longer within that 51 to 100% reinvestment, then there's going to be a need to probably reevaluate where you are in terms of whether or not you still are classified as a social entrepreneur, a social enterprise, right? So again, you have to be very jurisdiction specific to understand, what are the ramifications of changes as it relates to life cycles. So what I've seen from the research is that there's some, in terms of how social enterprises evolve at times, is that they do what we call social franchising. And this idea is where they spread either within the country or abroad. So the main idea, the logo, the branding remain the same, but you've then branched out into different geographical spaces. So you have broadened your reach and probably deepened your roots as well. And so those are, I guess, some of the examples that really come to mind in terms of how social enterprises evolve and probably broaden. There might be some who might also revert to being more third sector type organizations, so focus more on the social mission. So that is a possibility as well. But in terms of the social franchising is an example of how they can scale to become bigger, better social enterprises in different locations.
Great. And one last question, very quickly. There are myths and misconceptions about, like the nonprofit sector and even the social enterprise sector. Is it true to say that social enterprise employee salaries are low? And if so, how can social enterprises attract and retain top talent if salaries for employees are low, considering that most of the profits are reinvested?
All right. So, and that I think the first way I'll answer that is I made up a very important distinction in terms of how the reinvestment goes. So, for the social enterprises, before they calculate their surplus or profit, they'd have to then take care of all their operational expenses, and the salaries of the employees are a part of that. So you're not calculating your surplus or profits before those operational expenses are deducted. So the idea that you're probably going to have them having to take low or no salaries is probably a myth. What we can also say that it's probably not as lucrative in all sense when you compare them to, say, traditional enterprises in terms of the salary levels, right? Because I think it really depends on the reasons. Some of the literature speaks to some level of attrition in social enterprises because of this salary issue. So it can be a challenge because the salary, the maximization of profit is not the main objective. So maybe, the idea here is that it might not be comparable to a salary for someone in the private sector, and that might be, a fair thing. So what social enterprises normally do is that you normally are persons who are maybe firstly connected to the social mission. So they recognize what you're doing overall, right, as an organization. And then, they're likely to be able to understand that probably in the short term, depending on where you are in your growth cycle, you might not be able to offer the financing, the salaries that are competitive or comparable to traditional enterprises. But in some cases, there are, organizations that run in a similar vein as traditional enterprises. I mentioned Mondragon earlier, and these cooperatives run as regular businesses. And so they tend to attract persons, with the salary that they offer. But as I said before, the salary is often, for many persons who join social enterprises, not the only factor, right? So they might have other reasons why they join as well. But the salary is an issue in some social enterprises. But there are others that are comparable, if not even better sometimes, as it relates to salaries.
Great. Thank you so much for your wonderful insights and for sharing your thoughts on the questions and for addressing these concerns through these questions. With that, we come to an end of the Q&A session. I know we have overrun into the post-webinar networking session. Apologies for that. But thank you so much, Edward, for engaging with our attendees. And if for those of you who would like to get in touch with Edward, please find his email on the screen. Edward is also on LinkedIn, so please feel free to connect with Edward on LinkedIn or via email if you have any further queries about his work on social enterprises, to learn more about the Jamaican context or the Caribbean context, or to network or connect in general. Thank you so much, Edward, for the wonderful webinar presentation. Any final words of wisdom from you before we end the webinar and move into the networking session?
Yeah, I think it's probably very simple. Thank you, Eva, and thank you for all the participants who stayed and for those who provided questions in the chat as well. And it's really just to say that, I think one of my colleagues always says that, and it's a Jamaican kind of phrase, one hand can clap, right? The idea here is that we need a collective. And that is kind of what the social enterprise movement is about. So my own reason for being interested in the work is that I have been a beneficiary of, the kindness of others. And I see that, the work that is being done in the third sector is a very important part of the work that is done. And it's oftentimes work that is not given the limelight. It's not seen as glamorous, and so on. So my kind of work in this area is to kind of highlight, with myself and my team working in this Center for Entrepreneurship Thinking and Practice, is to highlight the work of these persons. It's unseen oftentimes, and it's not given the plaudits and the recognition. And so that's kind of really why it's important for us to advance their work. They're doing work trying to include persons who are often excluded from conversations, from opportunities, and so on. And so, social enterprises, third sector are important parts of, continuing that work. As I said, we know governments do, critical work, private sector do critical work, but we also have areas where they're not able to, or unable or unwilling to reach. And this is where an important sector helps. And so advancing their work, providing them with opportunities to grow is important. And I think it's so across the world. And so, thank you very much for the opportunity to share my work and the work of the center with everyone. And I look forward to networking and meeting, talking to others, hearing about, how others are doing, how is social enterprise in different countries across the world. And for those who are interested in starting social enterprises as well, interested in that conversation as well. Thank you very much, Eva.
Thank you,
and the
Edward.
team from CSC for organizing the session.
Thank you, Edward.